evidence doesn't just look a certain way. In fact, did I ever show you this? All right, look at that. How many people see an old woman? Well, it can't be an old woman and a young woman at the same time, can it? You can't see the old woman, can you? But some of you can. But the facts and the evidence is the same, right? Can't we just look at the evidence and see what the old woman is like a babushka? Instead of looking away, think about this is her eye, this is her big nose and chin, and she's like this. She's like looking down. Can you see it? Here's her hair up here. She's got a big nose. Here's her mouth and chin. And her headscarf is here. You can't see it? So gestalting pictures, and by the way, you can't see them at the same time. You have to go back and forth in your mind.
Oh, that's so cool.
Isn't that cool? There's a whole host of like gestalting pictures. That means that your presuppositions, remember he talked about presuppositions? Your ideas color the way that you see the evidence. Cool. You can't just say, well, let's just look at the evidence and it'll just decide the matter for us. Because the quote unquote evidence is the same for everybody, but it's seen differently according to your presuppositions and your ideas that you have in your mind. So that's why Bahnsen's going to say we have to look at the presuppositions.
If you mean, is God good in such a way, or can I give you evidence that you would accept? That would depend on what your presuppositions are.
No, I'm asking if God says something.
Remember what he's saying right there. If somebody says, I need to have evidence or proof for that, you first have to say, what are your presuppositions? What's your worldview? The conditions, what evidence and proof you accept. So if you've already ruled out, I don't believe in miracles, I don't believe in a God, what proof can you offer? Yeah, he wants to take it back to, I'm not just going to grant you we all believe in the same thing. I want to call out your prior presuppositions of what you think counts as that, and then critique that. So in one sense, and somebody asked this the other day, well, how would you answer a person that doesn't believe there's any justification? How would you prove that to them? I'm like, you wouldn't. They've already said I'm not playing the game, right? If somebody believes there are no such things as justifications, just beliefs, and go, how would you prove that to them? Well, proof requires justifications, and if somebody says, I don't believe in them, right, there's nothing you can offer them. And you've won the argument, because they can't come back and be like, oh, you're wrong, or why? Because the ability for their beliefs to be true and be able to distinguish it not being false requires what? Justification, that it's true and not false. Therefore, you've won the debate. There is no position. In fact, there's not much they can actually say that's even meaningful at that point. Now, somebody can go that route, but it doesn't mean they have the upper hand. It means they lost and they forfeit any reasonable conversation or meaningful conversation. Either A or B. Christian revelatory theism, or B, atheism. We all make presuppositions, laws of logic. What does he say? Abstract, universal, invariant, identity over time, etc. You have to say which one can actually give an account for that, uniformity of nature. Well, atheism says, as you saw Stein, there are no immaterial entities, souls, God, etc. So everything is materialistic, right? It's matter. It's matter bouncing around in different configurations. Also, B denies that there's actually a all-loving personal creator that creates all these things, the laws of logic, to be invariant. Because you might ask, well, wait a minute, if it's just molecules bouncing around, why do the laws not change? Why can't it be something different tomorrow? What if the molecules bounce in a different way? How can I account for that? How can I account for everything's material, something being abstract, universal, and invariant, when everything, as we saw the argument that I presented, everything material is particular. Materialism cannot account for universals and abstract, invariant laws. And if A and B are mutually, let's say they're contradictory positions, such that, remember what on the square of opposition, this cannot be true and this be true. They hold opposite truth values. This is the denial of A. If A, Christian revelatory theism, is that there's a loving, personal God that creates all this stuff on purpose, there's intention behind the universe. This, what's the opposite of doing something on tension? If you crashed into the stop sign, you didn't do it on purpose, it was what? An accident. So can the worldview of particular, constantly changing accidentalism account for, can you have accidental laws of physics? Can you have accidental knowledge? Can you have universal particulars? Can particulars account for universals? He's going to say, your presupposition not only doesn't make sense of everything that we hold, it contradicts it. And so it can't be B. And if it can't be B, and the only other worldview is A, then A is true, and A is the presupposition by which we affirm all logical processes and account for the world. We don't have another standard. There is no other standard. It's self-authenticating. It is that by which it's the necessary condition for the possibility of logic, reasoning. So, for example, remember when we said if P, then Q, necessary and sufficient. Remember sun? If I'm ice skating, I have ice skates. So ice skates is a necessary condition for ice. If I have a cake, I have at least flour, eggs, and so I can't get this without this. If there's knowledge, then there is some necessary condition for the possibility of knowledge. Correct? Just like, now you gotta find, what is it? Intentionalism through Christian revelatory theism, or accidentalism. It's accidentalism, it destroys the possibility of knowledge and even making arguments. Not accidentalism, therefore. So what we have is that God is, the Christian theism, is just as eggs and flour are the necessary conditions for having a cake, God, the Christian God, is the necessary conditions for knowledge. So that if knowledge, then God. Knowledge, therefore God. That's just if P, then Q, P, therefore Q. And somebody says, well, how do you prove that? You missed the point. There is nothing separate. If Q is the necessary conditions for proof, if that's the starting point, and you say, well, how do you prove that? You've missed the point. Q is that by which we prove everything else. It's the proof for proofs. Does that make sense? That's a transcendental argument. You do not prove God's existence by some separate arbitrary standard that you just make up and is unjustified. It is that by which everything else is proven. That's the argument that he's actually proven by God. So you can't say, Well, how do you prove that? That is the proof of proofs. Like, you can't go anywhere else. And that's why he will say, there are no arguments against the existence of God. Every argument is an argument for the existence of God. Everything is evidence for the existence of God.